Hello everyone, my name is Eternal_Savvy, pronouns he, she, and I will be the GM for this game.
And hello to everyone, I am Iris Wintercrane, pronouns she, her. I will be the player of this game and Savvy's fun little meat puppet that he controls.
Yeah, this will, I mean, Meat Puppet certainly fits the fucking vibe of this game, that's for sure. Yeah, so welcome to episode 0 of Heart of Hope. This is, for those who don't know, this is going to be a tabletop RPG game that we are running. If the words Game Master and Player didn't give that away, that is indeed what it is, but we're using a system that we will be talking more about today, which is called Necronica. That being said, I wanna give a quick preface to this. Do not feel the need to watch this, or rather listen to this episode, if you just want to get straight into it. We are going to be doing our absolute best to make it so that if you want to just watch episode 1 straight away, we're going to try and give not like overdone explanations of things as we go, but like we want to make it so that you can at least understand like the dice we're rolling, why we're rolling them, when we're in combat, all of that. So this episode 0 is really just if you want to get in on the ground floor of like how the system really works and what we're doing here. So
peek behind the curtain a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Just hear us kind of do our little preamble if you want to know what the deal is, and just be behind the curtain with us for a little bit before we start. I guess we'll start off with, first of all, if you haven't listened to anything that we've done before or watched anything that we've done before, my name is Eternal_Savvy. You can find most of my stuff on twitch.tv/Eternal_Savvy. I frequently do draw streams and video game streams and try to do tabletop stuff as well. And in the past, I've done a lot of stuff with Kingdom Death Monster, which Iris has been around for in the past as well, and is also going to be a fairly good indicator for some of the vibes of this game as well. If you want to see any of our stuff and get a general vibe of us, then that will be the best place to find my content at the very least. If Iris, if you've got places you want to shill that you do frequently as well.
Yeah. I mean, chill and give a little bit of background information. As I said, I'm Iris. I'm just a fellow creative who does various creative things. The main places I do stuff are with, we have a big collaborative show called Destruction Bench Agreement, which is a weekly tabletop RPG. That's over on twitch.tv/Patronix1234 if you're interested in that. We do tons of other creative projects, shows, role-playing things, all kinds of stuff. I also am one of the streamers on Starlight_Nebula on Twitch, where we do game streams, other art role-playing stuff here and there, birthday streams, all kinds of different fun stuff like that. I'm just kind of involved in a lot of different things like that, and if you hang out around here long enough, you'll not only see Savvy's content, but a lot of other really great creative people's content as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we've got the general introductions out of the way, let's talk a little about the game. There is definitely, I kind of want to get into a little bit of the background of not just the game, but also the kind of vibes that we like and why we like this game as a result. So the game that we're going to be playing, or that this is heavily based off of, and I'm using the system for, is Necronica, the long sequel. It is, funnily enough, a Japanese game, tabletop game, which did not ever receive a official translation to come over here to the West. And there is good reason for that, which we will go over. But Iris and I, especially, we discovered this game quite a number of years back at this point, and came across the information that we both knew of it and liked it and wanted to play it, and that was pretty much actually one of the first reasons we started talking, now that I think about it.
Yeah. Was showing off different things about the game, yeah.
Yeah. But so to just go over what you need to know, right? Because there's going to be a lot of heavy modifications in terms of what we're doing the game, but the main things to know going forward is that this is a 10-sided dice-based system. So if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs, a lot of them are D20 systems. They use the 20-sided dice to decide most things. And then there's damage dice and maybe a few others, depending on the situation. Necronica, it is D10s all the way down. They're the only other thing that I can think of in terms of a dice being rolled is D100s, which is just 2 D10s being rolled. So if you're ever confused about what numbers are happening, it's D10s. When a dice is rolled, it's always a D10 unless it specifies otherwise. And the other main difference, which I feel is important to list, because it's something which is very different from normal tabletop systems. If you're familiar with D20 systems, you will know that a natural 20, or when you roll a 20 on the 20-sided dice, that is a critical hit or a critical success of some kind, which basically means you auto-succeed and you do it very well, or and on the other side of things, of course, there is the critical fail, which is the critical 1, which is rolling a 1 on the dice. Now, there is critical successes and critical failures in this system as well, but a big thing to note is that normally in tabletop systems, when you have a plus 5, a plus 2, a plus or a negative of any kind, if you have a modifier of any kind to your roll, then it does not affect the number rolled. So even if you have a -2 to the roll, if you roll a 20, it's still an auto success, and vice versa. If you roll a natural 1, even if you have a plus 25 to the roll, you still auto fail on certain checks with a natural 1. Necronica does not do that. This is very important because it will come up a lot, because you may very well hear instances where we say, oh, a 1, and you go, that means a crit fail, right? But it doesn't, because if you have a way to give yourself a +1 in this setting, then, or in this system, you can actually avert critical failures and similarly force critical successes. If you get a 9, you can add a +1 or a +2 to turn that into a critical success, because it treats it as if you had naturally rolled that number. That is pretty much, I think, one of the main things we want to cover straight away, because it's going to be a bit jarring when Iris rolls a 10 and then goes, I'm going to increase how much damage I do with a bonus, which is backwards in D&D.
Essentially, Necronica does not really care about the natural roll of the die. If there are modifiers to it, either from supporting yourself or hindering enemies, vice versa, then that is taken into account as to whether or not you are going to succeed or are going to crit or are going to get the bonus damage from a crit or whatever.
Yeah, or even something as simple as determining what part of the body that you've hit, and that is I think that's a good segue into the next point about this system as well. Do you want to feel free to take it away on that part, actually?
Sure. So another pretty common thing with just RPGs and with basically anything is the idea of HP. That is used at least a bit, but in terms of me, the player, a very important difference, as well as other key NPCs and stuff, a very important difference is that I don't really have health to work with. I have body parts, and when I take damage, I have to essentially cross off some body parts that I can't use anymore, or I don't have anymore. And when I run out of body parts, I die. That's something unique about Necronica, is that, like, everything, at least in the base system, is essentially this undead, reanimated construct that doesn't really use, like, hearts, brains, organs, that kind of thing. It's literally just how much of yourself is intact.
And even in the original setting, having all of your body parts destroyed does not strictly kill you. It just means that you are incapable of doing anything.
Yep.
That is not a feature that will be carried over to this setting. If somebody is reduced to 0 body parts, they are dead in this game. But yeah, no, the interesting thing about that as a result as well is that this is actually what could be considered a negative feedback loop system, where the more you're losing, the more you're gonna lose, because you have less options in terms of skills, right? Because your skills and attacks are based on your body parts, which you are losing if you take damage. As a result of that, that kind of necessitates the ability to change your natural modifier on your dice face, and also ties into the balancing of this game. You're going to find with Necronica that there's going to be a lot of moments where not just Iris, but I as the GM, I'm going to be pulling some like actual bullshit. It's going to sound like nonsense. Like there will be moments where Iris is going to be literally killing something like 30 enemies in one attack, or being able to deal. Keep in mind, this is a system which deals in singular points of damage. So 1 damage is a pretty normal amount, and 5 damage is like devastatingly huge amounts of damage. There is going to be sections where Iris would just be able to just be like, "Yep, I deal 4-5 damage now." You know, I just blow someone up immediately. And the reason for that is it facilitates comebacks. It facilitates the ability to still do things if you tactically damage the right parts of your body. The reason we're going over all of this first in this episode 0 is so that if you are listening to this, you can be prepped for the fairly stark difference in how the game is going to feel in comparison to regular, D&D and that kind of thing. And I'm sorry to make, this initial part of episode 0 quite just mechanical in terms of what we're discussing, rather than it getting into the meat of the game, but that is very much what episode 1 is for. If you are here, I am assuming it is because you do want to know what the differences are in this system.
Yeah, that's kind of like, not only because of how unique it is, but just with how it works. That's one of the really fun things about the Necronica system, with, how we've played it in the past, where it's like, a single action, a single attack, a single turn in a combat can very, very quickly and abruptly change everything. It can change the entire situation, because there have been situations where it's like me or someone else or in the party is just getting completely screwed. We're rolling low. The enemies are just dogpiling on us. We're in a super dire situation. But then someone would use something at just the right time or in just the right circumstance and get a good roll. And suddenly, the tide has totally shifted because of just how the system emphasizes just very dramatic turns with things. So that's something that's both exciting, but, as Savvy mentioned, something that you should be expecting going in with how the combat kind of goes.
It's definitely something to be wary of, because I don't want people to go into this expecting a level of slow methodical tactics so much as very much more high paced, in the moment, seeing what we can do to make things change to your favor, that kind of thing. And
me killing 30 dudes,
Yeah, exactly.
or being eviscerated by 30 dudes.
Yeah, that too. And the reason we're using this system, for those who might think, God, that sounds insane, why would you ever do that, right? Is because the game is designed around the idea that it is not the end if you lose everything, right? I think before I get into one of the other major points in terms of running the game, which is turn order, because believe it or not, that's something we actually need to discuss here. But before we get into that, I think I'm going to use this as a brief moment to transition into the original setting and to give some warnings on this front, because I think at this point, if you like the sound of this game, the idea of somebody's body parts being the deterministic factor of their capabilities and your HP as well, it's a pretty cool system, right? The idea of, oh, my HP is how damaged I am. It's very cool for robots, for zombies, for a lot of different things. And you may be tempted immediately to go out and search up Necronica as a game system, because, you know, we don't speak Japanese. Unsurprisingly, there is a translated wiki done by fans, which is why we're able to play this in the first place. And I want to give a quick warning, because so we mentioned that the original setting is based on the idea that everybody is an undead construct. And that is inherently why being completely destroyed is not theoretically that big of a deal, because you can just get repaired. What we didn't mention, and is very, very worth mentioning at this point, is that in the original game setting, the author of that setting decided to make a very integral part of the story, but not the mechanics necessarily, that the players are all very young girls. And I'm not gonna dance around it. I mean it in the sense of lolitas, the bad kind. So the artwork as such does have that kind of a vibe to it, and it is one of the things that we highly dislike about the system, and is also the primary reason why I have decided to simply lift the mechanics from this game and not the setting, because we frankly find that just inexcusable, and we really don't like that such a phenomenal game system is tied to such an unfortunate theme and to such an unfortunate aesthetic. I mentioned earlier that this game has not been localized to the West and not been translated officially to the West, and that is the reason, because it shows underage girls in pretty horrible situations. That being said, I will emphasize, we are not taking any of that into our game. We are simply issuing that warning so that you are not blindsided if you decide to look this up. We have even created a version of the game, the game's rulebook, the translated game rulebook, which has removed those images because we just don't want anything to do with them. You can actually find that if you join my community on Discord. We have that in one of our channels if you want to view it that way instead. Just join up using our links and just ask around and you'll be able to find that no problem.
Yes. I personally, I really enjoy the themes of these innocent souls in what is essentially a, post-apocalyptic dead world who have to explore that dead world and experience the horrors it holds in order to also find the beauty left in that world and within themselves, while working together to avoid just completely losing their souls and their minds in the process and going through these brutally just, horrific challenges and stuff. I mean, I love that theme. It being applied to little kids is a little bit much. And especially with, I love body horror stuff. I love just gross, generally unmarketable, not so mainstream things in general in terms of horror and theme and stuff like that. But yeah, don't go looking this game up if you aren't prepared to see some pretty just disgusting art that, really the fact that he decided to go with this just theme of, Lolitas in this setting is really just a distraction and an unnecessary, ew factor from the main theme that we enjoy of not only the mechanics of the game, but just, the idea of this brutal undead universe where there are still these fragments of innocence left in it.
And finding hope in a dark situation, which is a theme that I very much gravitate towards as well, especially in contrast to really horrific worlds, and that is something which I will even discuss in this episode 0, the prevalent inspirations to the themes and the aesthetic of this game. You will see pieces of media which have that very strongly as a through line of the idea of, body horror and horrible dark settings, but which are contrasted even heavier as a result by finding hope, finding personal purpose, finding meaning in all of it.
Exactly.
That is what drew us to Necronica, and not that fucking awful shit that the author unfortunately felt the need to include.
It makes the game just more inaccessible and more just difficult to introduce new people to, but at the same time, that's why we're so excited to do this game, is we get to show off a lot of the mechanics and sort of general, gross horror elements that we enjoy without being truly abhorrent in any way.
Exactly. And to emphasize that there is really a fantastic system underlying all of that. Let's get a little bit back onto the original talk of just, one of the best parts of the system, in my opinion, which is how Necronica deals with turn order and initiative. I think one of the most prevalent complaints which I have encountered sometimes when it comes to tabletop RPGs is even videos on YouTube and that kind of thing of GMs saying how to keep your combat snappy, how to keep them fast, how to keep them engaging. My players are, looking at their phones on at the table when it's not their turn, or asking what's happened when it comes around to their turn because it takes 30 minutes to get round to them again, right? That has always been a problem, and I feel like this game has genuinely provided a system which solves that. The initiative in this system also acts as your action point total, which is a resource to spend on your attacks. So if you, say, for example, start with 10 action points, when it comes to initiative 10, it will be your turn, but your next turn will be determined by how many action points you spend right now. So if you use an attack or an ability which only costs 1 action point, then you will go at the next initiative of 9 because you've gone down to 9. And if there's no one else on initiative 9, then you get to go again. But if you spend, say, 4 action points, you will go down to 6 initiative, which will then mean that if there is anyone ahead of you, you have to wait for all of them to finish before it's your turn again. So there is some tactical decision-making to be had in how big or slow of an attack you decide to use, versus quicker attacks which can allow you to act more often but may not be as effective. And the other side of that as well is that the system includes a lot of instant reaction abilities, which can either buff your allies, or increase damage, or do extra attacks, or defend, or something like that. So that every turn, every player has something to gain by paying attention to what's happening even on other people's turns or enemy turns, because they will have abilities which allow them to go, actually, I want you to do 1 less damage, or actually, you have to target me, or actually, I'm going to move out of the way when you target me so you can't hit me anymore. And it allows people, at least in our experience, I'm sure you can agree, Iris, when we've had multi-person games and when we've had multi-party games, it really feels like everyone is paying attention all at the same time, because everyone has something to say when something happens in a good way.
Yeah, no, like, as cool as, other systems like D&D or what have you are with, like, a more traditional, you take your turns in order, and when it isn't your turn, you maybe have one or two things you need to worry about, but mostly you just wait for your turn again. As fun as that is, this system offers an incredibly interesting, dynamic, and like just straight up fun way of handling turn order, where and just action economy, because they're one and the same, and it's just very mechanically satisfying to work together as a party and use all of your individual capabilities that you have at your disposal in order to essentially manipulate the turn order and manipulate your action points to make sure that you are always being just as efficient and supportive to everyone else as possible, in order to counterbalance the fact that you're fighting against very strong and horrifying odds, and coming out just barely on top is like, it's just so fun.
Chef's kiss. It's fantastic. I really hope you guys get to understand what we love so much about the mechanics of this game when we start to get into things proper. Like, and of course, you're going to become very familiar with Iris's character, Vex. Vex, to cover things, is going to be the only consistent player throughout the entire game, and they are primarily built around, or Iris has built them around, excelling in melee combat. And if you want to go a little more into depth with that, by all means.
Sure. So yeah. Now what I just said about working together with your party doesn't apply as much here, because Vex is going to be mainly on her own. So I've tried to build her to be as effective as possible in solo scenarios. She is a melee fighter. She is the Necronica class called Thanatos, which are just, they're the ones who go in and fuck everything up. That's just what they're about. That's how they do. And they are generally, what they lack in like supporting party members, which of course isn't as necessary here, they make up for in just their straight up damage. And Vex in particular, it makes sense because as we'll get into, she's pretty used to working alone. She's pretty used to having the odds stacked against her. And as such, her sort of style of fighting really lends itself to going up against a great number of either unorganized or fairly just incompetent targets that she can very quickly take out. Now, against stronger, more competent targets, that's another situation entirely. But Vex is, as of now, I mean, she's still a base character. She only has a couple of main capabilities, which you'll be able to see more specifically in the show itself. But, that's her general deal, is she gets in, tears everybody to pieces, kill them before you can kill me.
And I'm very much looking forward to it. We've already run a combat or two to really test out Vex's capabilities just in a vacuum, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the other side as well is that there may very well be allies that I will be running as a DM, or whoever else, but whether or not that happens will depend on the game and depend on Iris. So now I finally feel like we've kind of gotten through the baseline, how the game works, what to know about the game before you get into it, all of that kind of thing. And I really did want to go over that stuff, even though I know it's a little bit boring in comparison to learning about the vibes of this game. I did really want to cover that first, because I feel it would have been a mistake to not cover something like the warning that we talked about earlier before we got into anything.
Yeah.
That being said, to talk about what we have going with the setting. So I've been working on this for some time, and we've been, working in tandem with, the kind of character that Iris has created for the setting, and kind of going back and forth with what's going on with Vex and me working that into the world. And I'm not going to, just explain the setting, because I think it will really genuinely be benefited by, you guys experiencing it naturally throughout gameplay. That being said, I may as well go over the vibes, and there is one or two things which are going to be very difficult to just bring up naturally in conversation, and I do generally want to avoid doing as you well know, this world is blah blah blah. I don't want any of that shit. So, so if you have been part of the server already, then you will know these vibes, but I'll go over them. We are looking at a number of different inspirations, and the first and foremost ones that I would say are pretty much the anime / manga Dorohedoro. We've got Repo the Genetic Opera, which is one of my favorites. It's a very, very grindhouse, very gory, very niche movie, which is about basically a time where there is legal repossessions of organs, if you want to get a general vibe of how screwed up and dark that setting is. Then there is also Blame, much more in terms of aesthetics, just in terms of like the way that people are very much these strange organic blends of cybernetics and mutations and human. They are something in between. There's a lot of very gnarly, strange, looking people in Blame, and I'm very much drawing upon that look. So if you want to kind of have a general visual style when you're listening to our descriptions, I would very much say Dorohedoro, Repo the Genetic Opera, and Blame are very, very solid inspirations there. And another very heavy influence is going to be Kingdom Death Monster. Kingdom Death Monster is also known as Death and Tits, in that it's very silly in a lot of places. It's very... I don't think this game is going to be horny, but Kingdom Death Monster is very horny, but in the sense that, like, there are people literally getting their entrails spilled out from giant lions killing them, or phoenixes that can age you into dust in a moment, or... But
they look really good while it's happening.
Yeah, they look so fucking hot while it's happening, or they are all, or you will have a settler who turns into a literal anime swordsman who has an eye patch which gives him benefits to his stats because it makes him look cool. Literally. And then he will go into a fight and he will be punched in the dick so hard by a giant man that it makes him die. Like, it's very silly while also being very gory. And I bring up Kingdom Death Monster for this game for the reason that we are going to be, no better word for it, really edgy, and we are embracing it. We want to go full hog where we want to, and thus we want to lean into the drama, and we're aware of how silly some of this is going to be. We're aware of, like, how ridiculous it's going to be when I describe Vex fucking emerging from a room that's literally coated in blood from the amount of damage she's done. It's dumb. We know it is, but it's fun. And so that's why I want to bring up Kingdom Death.
You gotta be here for the fun.
Yeah, as much as this is going to be a lot of drama, we are not necessarily going to be drawing a lot of drama from the fact that violence is here, so much as the violence is going to be here to portray a mood and to portray an aesthetic. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, I feel, is another good way to put it. I've been trying to channel a lot of that kind of feeling as well, of, two cyborg dudes discussing philosophy when, one of them's a terrorist, and they've just... And the protagonist of the game has just finished literally cutting up, like, 30 people to get to him with his katana, Like, that is what we're going for. And I suppose I then want to also kind of throw into this the fact that the mood of the city and the point of the city, and one of the things that you should know about the city that this is set in, is that the whole world is not like this. Violence is not a way of life anywhere else in the world, or in very few other places in the world. But the reason that people live in a city where this kind of fucking edgy nonsense happens, and you can just be turned into literal minced meat in a second by somebody, like, the idea, and this may not come up, which is why I want to bring it up here, is that the outside world beyond this city is generally like basically a dystopian dictatorship of some kind. Like, it's a tyranny. There is just a world order where people have to live by certain rules, and the idea is that living inside of this city of horrible violence is a way to escape that at the cost of safety, essentially. So that is basically what I'm going for with that. Another thing to mention, and sorry to be taking up so much talking time here, Iris, but it is, I suppose, my responsibility as the GM for this moment.
You're good.
Thank you. So the other side of things is that this one will be a little bit more easily explained in game, but I want to state it more plainly in episode 0. People in this setting across the world are not easily killed. It is so in real life, if your heart is destroyed or you lose most of your organs, you're just going to die. You're just going to die of shock. Even if it takes a minute by some miracle, you're going to die. In this game and in this setting, you pretty much just have to have your brain destroyed in order to die. And that's not to say that having your organs blown out by some guy with a giant metal fist
body parts blown off.
Yeah, have your body parts blown off and scattered all over the ceiling. Like, that's still going to kill you, right? But it's not going to kill you immediately, is the point. The idea being that whether it's, genetic engineering or just everyone just being a little bit cybernetic, as a result of, I don't know, nanomachines, son, or whatever, even a regular person could have their organs destroyed, and if they can get to a doctor who can replace them in time, then they will be okay. And we are also just in a world where you can have a grown liver or organ put into your body and there is no worry of rejection. That is just the world state that we're in. And the reason for that, partially, yes, is to make it so that we can actually use the Necronicus system. I've actually had to alter a couple of things of the Necronicus system to make it so that there is not incentive to simply fucking shoot everyone in the head that you can't be bothered to deal with, for Iris. We'll get to that in game.
Which is different from how I tend to go about things in real life, so...
Yeah, but the main thing, the main reason I mention it is that when you get into session 1 and onwards, you will be hearing, people literally being kind of just horribly fucked up in multiple ways by virtue of attacks that they receive, and they will still keep going. You might ask yourself, how the fuck is this person able to keep fighting when he's literally had his heart exploded? And the answer is going to be because that is just how people are these days. And also people who receive cybernetics and mutations and all of these other special things, they are even more resilient because they have, more things stopping them from dying. In the case of cyborgs, who cares if their arm gets broken? Who cares if their mechanical heart gets destroyed because they have redundancies in place and they don't feel that pain? All of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
it's a good thing we're going over that here and now, because otherwise it would feel a little weird when I just viciously disembowel someone, cut their legs off and both their one of their arms, and then later they're still crawling towards me, leaking blood and viscera, and they go, It's pretty crazy how in this city, genetic engineering and science has advanced to the point where I'm still alive right now, huh? That's crazy. And Vex would be like, yeah, I guess I need to, like, sever your spine or just completely destroy your brain in order to take you out fully,
Yeah.
And it would feel really organic and natural when that happens.
Yeah, and no one would bat an eyelid at all as to why that conversation is happening at all.
Nope. Just the kind of things we always talk about, how we have to breathe and, like, we have blood in our veins and stuff.
Yeah, and how when I get stabbed, I die. I always... I have planned that if that happens to me, I will just explain that to the nearest person in case they're the protagonist,
Well, what you do is you can do it in advance even. You're just, like, walking, shopping at the mall, and you're like, if I got stabbed in the fucking bowels right now, I'd probably just bleed out and die of shock immediately,
Yeah, just in case they're the protagonist and they need to know that. Just in case. But, and, yeah, I suppose... With that covered, then, there's really only one other thing to cover, which is pretty much the last inspiration and the last thing that I'm doing in terms of this game, which will, I suppose, preemptively explain one aspect of it. I very much took a lot of inspiration from Shadow of Mordor, or Shadow of War, whichever one. The Iris and I have both, in the past, had conversations about how enthusiastic we are about the Nemesis system from those games. And how disappointed we are.
It's very fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. And as a result, we're extremely disappointed that, Warner Brothers have some fucking how managed to successfully patent that technology in games. And so we're not going to see it anywhere else. And as a result, I really wanted to come up with and instigate not a direct version of it or anything, but I wanted something similar. And so the way that that's inspired things is that this kind of is a perfect match because people are very hard to kill in this setting. It gives rise to the ability for me to bring back people who otherwise seemed like complete nobodies, to have them show up again, all better and with a new scar to harass Vex once more. And that then further played into the next part of this, which is the gangs. People who have been keeping up with me talking about this on my streams or with the Google Docs, Google Forms rather, will know about these gangs already. We will actually be able to discuss these more naturally in game. But there is basically 4 or 5 gangs in the city. Well, 4 gangs and 1 unaffiliated group in this city. And each of them have their own MO. Each of them have their own goals, their own aesthetics and vibes. And they will be the prevalent driving force behind what happens in the city. In lieu of a government force or in lieu of a ruler of any kind, instead gangs and crime became the controlling forces here. And so there will be territories which will shift according to, what is going on with different events. And Vex will have power over certain parts of it, depending on what events she decides to help or hinder. If she decides to help out one of the gangs known as the Collectors, who are cybernetics, who are primarily focused on debt collecting, if she helps them out, then they might gain a little bit of extra territory. If she decides to hinder Section C for some reason or another, who are, basically surgeons and doctors who know how to, mutate genetics and stuff, then maybe they'll lose some of their resources. Maybe they'll become less popular as a gang, that kind of thing. It's not going to be, Vex is not going to be the deciding factor in the same way that you might see Talion literally brainwashing hordes of orcs and, creating a literal entire army. That is not what we're going for. But there is going to be, certain events that happen as a result of gangs pushing into certain areas, and the specific status that Vex is going to have within the city is going to allow her to have a little bit of push and pull on certain aspects of things. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that turns out, because it's definitely going to be cool to see what you do with that.
yeah, Savvy has really gone out of his way to create a really cool, interesting, and dynamic setting with a ton of moving parts and a ton of different ways it can go based on what happens and based on what actions Vex chooses, and it's all with the goal of entertaining all of you as well as stressing me out as much as physically possible. Like, that's really the sort of end state we're working towards.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's I'm very excited for this. I'm very, very thankful that we get to run this. And I'm keen to have this in podcast format as well. It's going to mean that if you hadn't gathered already, this is all going to be pre-recorded, which I think it has to be if it's on a podcast format, but who knows? Maybe I'll date myself in the future with that comment. But yeah, no, I'm hopefully going to be able to add a little bit of audio flair every now and then, here and there. But I don't think I really need to go over any of that. The main thing here is thank you very much if you've gotten this far with this episode 0 summary. It's certainly not as engaging as just getting into the story straight away, but I know that there is a lot of people who really like to be informed about, you know, the more nitty-gritty mechanical questions of these kind of things. I know I'm definitely one of them. I've personally very much enjoyed other podcasts and games where they have explored and explained aspects of a system which I would not have played with before, and it does help a lot with context. So if you have been listening up to pretty much the end of this particular episode 0, thank you very much. It means a lot that you've put the time into getting a little bit of context as to what's going to be happening going forward. I can only hope that you enjoy what comes next. And in theory, you should have episode 1 to start listening to pretty much immediately if things are going to plan, or at least in like an hour's time, a day time if something goes wrong. But yeah, I can only hope that you have a good time. We look forward to seeing you there.
There's a lot of other really, really cool aspects of both Necronica as a game, as well as this really cool setting Savvy and I have been discussing. But if you want to see those things, then yeah, you'll just have to get into it.
Indeed, you'll have to tune in from here on out to Heart of Hope. See you there.